Welcome back to another episode of The Range, where we explore the people, products, and ideas shaping the future of golf. Today's guest is Matt Williams, co-founder and president of Albatross Golf Inc, the company behind Golf TRK, the TrackMan-powered indoor membership club, and Noonan AI, a virtual caddy that turns your swing data into on-course strategy. Matt's story is a masterclass in Midwest entrepreneurship, bootstrapping not one, but two businesses, leveraging local startup ecosystems and building products that meet golfers where they are. In this episode, we dig into how Golf TRK found product market fit as a simulator-first experience, how Noonan is changing the way players approach course management, and how community, both personal and professional, has played a central role in Matt's journey. Let's get into it. Welcome to The Range, the podcast where we explore the intersection of passion and business in the world of golf. I'm your host, Ari Ratner, and each episode will dive into the stories of the innovators, entrepreneurs, and trailblazers who are transforming the game we love into thriving businesses. Whether you're a golf enthusiast, an inspiring entrepreneur, or just curious about the business behind the sport, you're in the right place. So grab your clubs and join us on The Range as we tee off into the world of golf entrepreneurship. Welcome back to another episode of The Range. I'm joined today by Matt Williams, president and co-founder of Albatross Golf Inc, owners of Golf TRK and Noonan. I will let Matt introduce both companies, but just a special introduction as Matt joins us from Kansas City, another Midwest golf entrepreneur. Seems to be a pattern here, which is exciting. It's not just growing on the coast. So Matt, welcome to The Range.
Thanks, Ari. It's great to be here.
So let's give the audience introduction to your businesses, and then would love to kind of hear how you were first connected to the sport.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I basically spent my whole career in enterprise software sales. I grew up in Iowa, like many of your fellow Midwest founders, little 9-hole golf course. They call themselves a country club, but they're pretty much a bar with a golf course. But it was a great spot for me to get introduced to the game. But yeah, I started our business with a couple co-founders in 2023. We were really kind of looking for some places that we could play year-round simulator. There's certainly a few, kind of niche players out there, some facilities out there that were doing a lot of the bar entertainment concepts, and we really wanted somewhere where us as avid golfers could go. So because there wasn't anything, we decided to build one, and that's where Golf TRK got started. Kind of a performance-only facility, membership-based. People pay a monthly fee, get unlimited access. We partnered with TrackMan and high-end technologies. We had the only in 500 miles, we like to joke, except if you're, Gary Woodland, and it really took off. So while we were building that, because we had a bunch of pent-up entrepreneurism in us, we decided to start a couple more businesses, kind of capitalize on the success of our initial facility and build out a franchise off of that. And then we also kind of got into the tech space. So because I've got in technology, I really realized that there was probably more that we could be doing with the data. One of the things that kind of popped up to us when people came into our facilities, even my dad really had no idea how they actually hit their golf clubs. So being able to see what the true carry numbers were. Yeah, so I just felt like we could be doing more with this data. So we built an app that will take data from a golf simulator and basically become your virtual caddy. So it gives you shot recommendations on the golf course. We originally thought this would be a great complement to our facilities because we were wanting to incentivize people to come in kind of during the quote unquote for golf. When it got nice outside, people come out and want to play more out. So if we can get them using the data, actually using it on the golf course and being a good complement, then those things work really well together, and that they incorporate the indoor golf more into their on an annual basis. So that was the origination, and it's kind of taken off from there.
Yeah, let's stick on that point for a little bit, because I think you're one of the first entrepreneurs on this podcast to start two businesses fairly close in terms of time. So let's go back to kind of the origination of Golf TRK and talk about some of the things that you and your partners had to do to identify the right spot, to feel good about investing both time and resources to opening a physical facility, and then ultimately how you started to drive memberships and activity in the space.
Yeah, great question. So we started and we bootstrapped everything. So we've been fortunate enough to build good careers, and we had some, we're going to call it a little bit, and putting them into golf seemed like a really good thing. We like to always say that, worst case scenario, we tricked our wives into buying ourselves some TrackMan simulators. If this all comes crashing down. Fortunately, that didn't happen, but yeah, it created a little bit of collateral for us. But I think probably the biggest thing that kind of got me over the hurdle was going through the business model. We wanted to keep everything very low operationally complex and kind of keep our overhead down. So it spent about a year trying to find the right facility. We ran a bunch of numbers to make sure that everything was going to work out from a profitability standpoint. And when we ultimately kind of landed on everything, we realized that because we're doing this membership model, the kind of the barrier to being profitable was extremely low. And at some point, I think you just got to bet on yourself. It's like, look, if I can't get 35 members into my facility, I'm really not that great of a salesperson. A little bit of confidence, a little bit of, making sure everything is strategically done well. And frankly, there are a lot of things that can go wrong. And we made a lot of decisions that panned out to be right. I'd like to say everything was well thought through, but I'd be lying if I said, hey, we really knew what was going to happen. But yeah, some good decisions, some good planning, and I think luck tends to follow that.
And then as the physical location or that brand started to grow, and you had this nugget of idea for Noonan and the tech that supports it, talk about how you and your founders, your partners balanced growing that side of the business versus launching Noonan, and how you continued to do that as you operate both businesses.
That's the nice thing about having co-founders is you can divide and conquer. So me having some more of the tech background, my other founder being very well versed in the franchise space, he was able to really kind of run the physical operations. Obviously, you in any wear lots of hats, so we had to double duties quite a bit. But I was able to really focus my attention on the Noonan. So I got started doing a bunch of entrepreneurship contests. Having the tech focus kind of opens up a little bit of a different set of doors. Since software is infinitely scalable, it tends to attract certain types of investors, certain types of interests, specifically pro area that offer support for building kind of a tech business. So I tapped into those to try and minimize any kind of startup cost. And what really worked out well is I got very ingrained in that startup ecosystem here in the Kansas City area. And a lot has been built up and a lot of doors have been opened because of that.
That's fantastic. And as you guys think of the future of Albatross, you have a physical experience that can be both local but then scalable from a franchise perspective, and then you have a digital experience that kind of has a much, I guess, broader reach. Talk about how you guys are balancing or thinking about growth around both of the businesses.
Yeah. So we went through a lot of decision around, do we keep these businesses separate or do we put them together? And originally we had them all separate. We had individual cap tables, and those are always fun to we're never going to want to do it again. I can guarantee you that. But we did have them basically separate LLCs. So when it came time for us to realize that, hey, we're going to have to raise money, the opportunity ahead of us is quite significant, and we want to capitalize and strike while the iron's hot. We knew we needed to take on outside investment. And we spent a little bit of time trying to raise money for these businesses individually, knowing the fact that they're really going to attract two different investor profiles. So tech having a higher upside tends to attract a certain investor. Brick and mortar businesses are going to attract a different type of investor who's very familiar with that. To find somebody, especially an institutional investor that's going to do both, is extremely rare. When you're fundraising, you really got to maximize your time coming up and making sure that, hey, if I'm going to try and find that needle in the haystack investor who is going to like both, is that really an efficient use of your time or not? And we realized quickly on that the institutional investor going to be the person for us, but we knew that combining these businesses was the right thing to do, because when we looked at just how we're going to be successful and like the long-term goals that we're going to have for this, we knew we wanted to grow this really, really big. We knew that the tech was going to have a very high upside. We also knew that the brick and mortar has a really great cash flow. So if we realize if we can put these together, the brick and mortar can help us sustain from a cash flow standpoint, cover all of our overhead, especially all the R&D that we're putting into the tech, then we know that as time goes on, the tech will eventually have kind of that growth and is going to, I guess, put a pretty sizable on the business. So that's kind of the thesis of why we wanted to put them together. It helped us kind of make sure that we capitalize on the amount of dilution that we would have to give up in order to achieve the outcomes. And it really worked out. Now, we certainly alienated a lot of investors and we kind of just didn't want to even have the conversation knowing that it's really not going to be a good fit. So we really focus on the angel network. And one of the things that we really wanted to do and was fortunate enough to be located in the state of Kansas is they've got great programs to help startups get off the ground. One of the things we did initially was go through the Kansas Angel Investor Tax Credit Program. They give 50% of investment back to angel investors in the form of a tax credit. So if I put $100,000 into Noonan, $50,000 back in tax credits. So that was like the linchpin that I think got a lot of people over the line. A lot of people,
Yeah,
that sounds great. And we say, hey, time to write a check, right? And they crickets. But when you come back and say, well, I can give you $50,000 worth of tax credits back, changes the conversation a little bit. So that's a great catalyst for getting this going. They've had follow-on investment, the Department of Kansas programs and all of that. Happy to talk more about that. But that was a huge fit. And there's lots of other programs on the state level that can help any kind of early founder get started.
Yeah, I think actually staying on that point is important because over the past episodes we haven't really talked about identifying different programs or areas to help get a business off the ground. So, I think it'd be helpful to tell the audience how you came about those programs, how to decide which of the programs are best for you at the time. And just how you guys learned about them, applied. What was that process like?
Yeah. I would say probably the thing that got us started on and kind of engage in this community is there's some entrepreneurship competitions that are kind of going around. A lot of times they're being organized by a local university. So I went to the University of Iowa. I went through the John Papa John Entrepreneurial Center, got a minor in entrepreneurship. So I knew that these things tended to do some research, I think through LinkedIn and some other things that just started to pop up, got on someone's algorithm and started to feed me some of this information. But we did kind of two early on entrepreneurship competitions. One was a program called Pure Pitch Rally, which is more of a private organization. They basically take 8 entrepreneurs, go in and apply, and then you basically do a 3-minute pitch in front of an auditorium of 100 sharks. Each one of them comes with $1,000 check, and literally at the end, they hand the mic around and say who you're gonna give the $1,000 check to. Yeah, it's kind of like a pretty mental thing, just sitting on the stage and people saying, "Yeah, I like yours," or "No, But it was great. That in the Midwest, I think especially people tend to you having some sort of a lot of them like to be the first one to step out and say, "Hey, I'm going to bet on them." But if you have validated you, that opens up the floodgates. So once we got that, we got, which is great. Then we went on, we did another program through University UMKC here in the area. We got a digital sand grant, which was a $20,000 grant to basically do an MVP. And that's kind of do our development and then get basically the platform off the ground.
And so that's all related to Noonan. So you guys had an established business with Golf TRK, and this was to raise money to help grow the tech side of things.
Correct.
Yeah, cool. What was that feeling like when you've presented you pitched the business amongst 7 other kind of competitors, whether in the space or not, and then you're just waiting around listening to potential investors tell you whether they're going to invest in your business or like they tell me like what were the feelings that were going through you and the other co-founders as you sat and waited?
Out there, I want to say competitors, my fellow entrepreneurs who are doing really cool things in healthcare, for example, or consumer electronics. They have really fascinating business with really strong, frankly, missions, and it's really impactful. So when I get up there and saying, "Hey, I'm going to help people play better golf," and they're getting up there saying, "Hey, I'm basically going to save your life," there's a little bit of a weighted scale when it comes to that. So I knew that the deck was stacked against us. And I think honestly, the thing that helps move the needle is getting out and actually doing something, like prove that this works, right? I think the best proof points you can do are actually showing, you can generate sales and that you are actually getting traction in the market. And I think that's probably the thing that holds a lot of people back is you come up with a lot of reasons why you say, "Oh, I need to wait until this happens in order to get started." It's like, no, you don't. Put a website, put up a button. You don't need to have a product. If you have an idea, literally start to do a little marketing, spend $30 on a Wix page and see if anybody clicks on that button. That's a great proof point. And then you go to an investor and say, "Hey, look, I had this idea. I built something. I actually generated interest. I got 5,000 clicks on people who wanted to order this. Now I know I can at least go build it and I'm going to have demand right there. These are the things I think you just got to get past in your mind to say, I got to just take the first step. And it's really just solving one problem after the next.
And it's interesting because when we had our intake call, I didn't become aware of this. So at Iowa, you took classes in entrepreneurship or minored, or so there's been an element of entrepreneurship kind of in your DNA, at least from college. Explain or talk about why you went into sales and how that experience has given you a foundation to be a successful entrepreneur.
Yeah. I like to just kind of follow everyone else's playbook. So I'd be lying if I said I kind of came up with all this on myself. But for me, it's learning from other people, learning what was successful, and you don't need to reinvent the wheel. So a lot of my inspiration came from my dad. He started his career in sales. He was in technology. He has started and sold 2 different businesses. So I've always been around entrepreneurship and knew kind of eventually that's where I wanted my path to lead. Like I said, I'm not that, and I can't generally just jump out of college knowing nothing and start a business. I don't think I would have been successful at that. So I felt like the best way to do that is to build a skill, maybe learn an industry or learn, something about something that would allow me to build that confidence to make that leap. And that's kind of what I did. So when I graduated, I went for a big healthcare technology company here in Kansas City. I started in consulting, kind of learned a product. Then I moved into sales and sold that same product. And for me, that was great because I like to understand the things that I'm selling because I want to understand position is. And frankly, that skill set has served me extremely well. I've had a really good sales career and now being able to kind of identify what makes value within a customer's mind. And I think that has helped us kind of hone in on, look, I don't want to just go build a bunch of features that I think are cool. They've actually got to solve a problem. They've actually got to provide value to the customer. And that I think has helped us avoid a lot of pitfalls when it comes to overdeveloping something.
Super interesting. And so, it's interesting because when it comes to a tech product, oftentimes, at least from an outsider's perspective, you build an MVP, you get feedback, you adapt, you change, you're constantly editing, right? Or improving the product. Talk about how you guys went from this idea for Noonan to starting to get feedback outside kind of the core audience that you serve, which is you and your co-founders, sorry. And talk about how you can iterate based on that feedback and ultimately how a tech product is never final or never finished and how that drives you getting that feedback and constantly improving on the product.
Yeah, for sure. And I got to remind myself every day. I constantly look at things that I wish would work better. And you kind of got to realize how far you've actually come and the amazing thing you've actually done. But we started, it was an idea. I didn't want to go out and spend a whole bunch of money since we're bootstrapping this whole thing on to prove this out. So I literally built out an Excel spreadsheet. I am not a great Excel spreadsheet person. You put golf in front of it and trust me, I'm a hand about it. So learned a lot about statistics, learned a lot of spreadsheets, pivot tables. So I literally built out a really cool spreadsheet to prove out that this could actually. And yes, it was exceptional. It wasn't pretty, but at the end of the day, I could literally plug in distance measure and my data from a golf simulator, and it would spit out what club I should hit and get based off of my actual club tendencies. And that was the proof point that I actually works. I was on the golf course like 5 different times. It basically told me to take a different club than the one that I did. And it was right. And it was just misjudgments on my side. I wasn't thinking about making the right calculations in my head. To me, that was an indication, a signal that this is going to work. So that kind of gave us the motivation and the confidence to go out and hire a dev team, build out a real app MVP, which we did with the help of some funding sources that we got. And we've continued to iterate over there. So absolutely, job's not done. I think the challenge that we have right now is just trying to kind of narrow the focus. There's so many things that we want to incorporate, but I tend to take more of if you listen to Zuckerberg and those guys talk about how they approach development, it's very short feedback loops, right? Get the product into the market, get people to give you feedback. It may not be perfect. You know that going in, but rather than you trying to guess at what people are going to say, let them tell you where you need to improve because you're probably going to get surprised at what they think works really well and what they enjoy versus what you think, maybe needs to improve, be improved on, or what features you want to go add. So I
Yeah.
think the real customer feedback is critical.
So you mentioned, the importance of the feedback loop from a golfer's perspective. I think it's interesting because you have this other business that's the brick and mortar simulator experience that makes so much sense for Noonan to kind of scale on a much broader level. Talk about the importance of getting that operator feedback in terms of the app and how it helps its customers out.
Yeah. So I think the best inventions or, entrepreneurship startups basically come out of the need. So Noonan came out of the need of wanting to improve retention within our brick and mortar facility. And we've identified several other things that we're working on just based out of, deficiencies that we see kind of within this market and what doesn't exist and things that we just frankly have to go build because we need to be able to perform better for our customers. That's been a phenomenal, I think, a linchpin or I guess catalyst to get some of these ideas going. And then obviously having a built-in customer base that can give you real-time feedback has been critical. I mean, these are the people who we are trying to target. So we can send out surveys, we can, get, real-time feedback to say, hey, here's what we're building. What do you think about that? What do you think about pricing? What do you think about this feature? I think that's invaluable in order to have really that direct line to basically the customers you're going to be going after.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because your product, certainly the Noonan product, speaks to, like you mentioned earlier, an avid golfer, someone that really wants to understand their game and how to improve it and just make better selections. As we think about the evolution of the sport, we're bringing in more novice golfers, people that are kind of socially interested, but not very serious about the game. How does both Golf TRK and Noonan play into this evolution of the sport?
Really excited about where golf is going. Obviously, we saw a whole bunch of people get introduced to the game through Top Golf and those other types of experience, but now you're seeing that wave essentially graduate from those entertainment concepts and wanting to get more serious, right? They've been bitten by the golf bug, but there's frankly this major gap in between hitting balls in a Top Golf and going out and playing on a real golf course. And that's where I think these indoor facilities can really help out because it gives them really this, unintimidating opportunity to start to get better in a much more realistic type environment. Like if I go and play on a track, man, I'm in my own bay. If I shank one, I don't have to worry about, holding anybody up behind
Yeah.
me. I can still play very, very quickly. All those people that thought, golf is stuffy that takes 6 hours, like it eliminates all of those different things. And it gives you all of this incredible feedback to know exactly why I'm not playing well, right? If I go get a TrackMan and I get some lessons, I'm able to really set myself up to improve much quicker than I would trying to figure it out myself on a driving range or spending thousands of dollars in green fees just to get the reps in order to kind of figure this game out. So I think these simulators businesses are going to really fill that wedge in between, the Top Golf kind of golf curious crowd and actually getting them onto the golf course and actually playing more real rounds. And it's going to continue, right? It's going to continue to be a great compliment to people as they start to improve upon their game, get better even to the top echelon. I mean, it doesn't stop because you see every single PGA pro out there. They've all got a TrackMan right behind them. It's getting them the data. They wouldn't practice without it because frankly, they don't have time to waste just hitting shots blindly. So I don't see that ever going away. In fact, I think that will enhance and I'm excited to kind of see what would happen. And I would say the same thing with Noonan. When I started golfing when I was 8 years old, I'm that moron, right, who would play day after day, shoot the exact same score and not really know why I'm not scoring better. And frankly, it wasn't until I'm 34 years old building a tech platform did I start to really understand what course management actually was. It's kind of something that these pros just intuitively know, but that's never really talked about. I think it's honestly probably the unspoken thing that has made Tiger and Jack so good. I mean, they talk about it a little bit, but you don't really understand what they're saying. When Jack says, I've eliminated the left side of the golf course, right? He's really talking about course management. And when I think about how I make decisions on a golf course to set myself up for success, it's actually just a process, right? I get my yardages, I factor in the wind, I look at where my misses is. Each one of those steps, frankly, can be automated now that we have the data to go do it. And that's, I think, what we've developed with Noonan is basically the ability to automate the entire decision process. So even if I don't really know what I'm doing, I can still get the best shot recommendations that I possibly can. So I can play my highest percentage shot every single time and kind of unlock that scoring potential that's already within you.
Yeah, which is super exciting. And I think, I mean, we come to the sport from different areas, right? I started golfing a handful of years ago. I'm still a very bad golfer, but there's that competitiveness in me that I bring from kind of my other experiences in sports that now has translated to golf, where I want to know where I'm missing so I can improve. I want to know, those unlocks that you talked about so I can be a better golfer, which ultimately will make the experience better for me as well as the people I'm golfing with. So super interesting. So let's hone in, on how you got into the sport. You said you've been playing since you were 8. You also mentioned, your dad as an influence from an entrepreneurial standpoint. Was he an influence from a golf standpoint?
Yeah, he'll probably kill me for telling this story, but it's a good one. So I started, like I said, my parents belonged to the little 9-hole golf course, country club, if you will, Ankeny Golf and Country Club. Shout out. Great course. Honestly, it's a great course. I would literally started with a little summer camp with a good friend of mine. They've got a kind of a little driving range and just, started swinging the clubs and just kind of got introduced. And I frankly fell in love. I come from a golfing family. My dad's played. My grandparents before have belonged to that country club probably since the 70s or 60s. Long time. So I always knew that would be something that I wanted to go do. And I definitely fell in love with the sport. So I was literally out there from sunup to sundown in the summers. That was basically daycare for me. My mom would drop me off at like 7 a.m. and I would play, basically until I got tired and just hopped in the pool and cooled off. So
it's a win-win for both of you guys.
Yeah, exactly. It's good for me too, because I'm a competitor and I don't necessarily need somebody else to play with. I can always compete against myself. So it fit really well, I think, into my personality. But when it came to my dad, like I said, I'm a little headstrong, a little competitive, and I was having a bad day one time, and he tried to give me some advice. Right? He's tried to say, hey, keep your head out. I just hit a bad shot. It's like, you know what? Tried to step in there. But at that point, I've already had like a few lessons, so I think I know everything. And he stepped in, like, why don't you maybe kind of like focus on keeping your head down? And I stopped him. I said, Dad, you don't know the F you're talking about. And frankly, that moment, I think, kind of shaped a lot of our relationship moving forward. To his credit, he realized he did not have a ton of experience with how you're actually supposed to play golf and things like that. But he really kind of let me go figure things out by myself, which I think has served me well, right? I think being able to go out and try and kind of figure these things out, you learn a lot that you really don't if somebody tries to tell you. And of course, he's always there to help me out whenever I ask for it. I don't mean to kind of sound like he's an absentee father by any means, but it was a really good defining kind of moment in my life on the golf course. Another one that actually happened pretty recently, and
You're good, man.
so I've got a 5-year-old son, and sorry, I didn't think I'd get emotional.
I love it, dude.
I've got a 5-year-old son, and he got diagnosed with cerebral palsy. We are extremely lucky. He is very mild, but he does have some trouble with tightness in his left side. And we have always wanted to make sure that he never felt like he was being held back on anything that he ever wanted to do. And obviously, like, we love golf, and you don't need to necessarily be the best athlete out there to go play. And we got actually doing some research. We found this adaptive tour that's going on through the USGA. And interestingly enough, the number one player in the entire world has cerebral palsy.
Interesting.
So his name is Kit Popert. And he came to Wichita, Kansas to play in the USGA championship. And my wife reached out to him. He posted on Instagram saying, hey, I'm coming to town, or I'm coming to Kansas City, like looking for carpools. But we followed on Instagram. Right? Wife reached out. He invited us to come up. So literally overnight, I had no idea this was going on. Got in the car, brought our kid, drove out to Wichita. He spent 3 hours with us on the driving range. The next day we came back, and he literally had our son out, run the golf cart. The very first hole that we got onto, it's so important for him to be able to get out and like walk and stretch his legs and make sure that you keep everything loose. Ran down the fairway with him. And he thought that was so important. And anything you can do to keep that fun, Like he always talked about how he would just kick a soccer ball and, he can't walk for 3 miles just doing nothing, but he put a soccer ball in front of him and he starts running and goes crazy.
Yeah.
And he did that with my son. And we spent 3 hours together. He is a phenomenal human being and he is an unbelievable golfer. All those guys are incredible, incredible golfers. Some are double amputees. Some people have one arm. I mean, it is amazing. They will kick my butt, and I'm a one handicap. Like,
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
joke. These guys are absolute sticks. And to see that being created and to give, like, kids who maybe have a little bit of a disability, who maybe would be kind of held back in some other sports, some hope and what they can go achieve, I think is an amazing thing. And I'm so, so thankful that we're able to go out, spend the time with Kip, get signatures, have our kids have a very positive experience. And I think that's honestly the power of golf.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it speaks to golf. I think it also, speaks to, you and your wife and how you're raising your child and children and those around them. And it shows them what's possible, right? And I think that's so important that also crosses over into entrepreneurship. And I think it's interesting. You had mentioned kind of, the challenge of golf and how you just kind of have to pick up the sticks and go play and do it. And would love to get your perspective around the similarities between golf and entrepreneurship. And I think there's a level of passion that you just, explored in your story that I think sits on both the golf side and the entrepreneurial side. But
Yeah.
talk about some of those similarities between the sport and business.
Yeah. There's a good quote. I don't know if in my mind, it makes sense, but maybe this is a little bit of a stretch of what he actually said. But I think Brooks Koepka said something one time when, he was dominating all the majors and somebody asked him how he is able to continue to do it with, a field of 125 really, really good players. And I think he said, well, actually, I really only have like 20 people I need to beat. Like, I know that I'm already better than 90% of them. I really just got to beat these 20 guys. And, to me, like when I make the parallel to entrepreneurship, what I think about is there are so many things, so many basics that don't require any skill. They just require you to go out and do. If you are consistent, if you are, making just good sound decisions, if you're following up, if you're treating people with respect, those things, if you do those, every single one of them, you're already ahead of 90% of the company, right? And I think you can build a very strong foundation, a very strong business just doing those basic things. So you don't need to come up with an incredibly great idea and, this very elaborate business model in order to be successful. I think you just need to be doing some of those basics correctly. And to me, I think there's a lot of parallels that I see within golf is as long as you're being consistent with training, you're doing things smart, you're already ahead of so many people out there who are just not doing those fundamentals.
Yeah. And, we touched on early on how, you're in Kansas City, how there's seemingly this burgeoning entrepreneurial market in the Midwest when it comes to golf. I think, certainly Noonan can be built anywhere or you could, build it from anywhere. Talk a little bit about the importance of staying in the Midwest and grounding the business. Obviously, Golf TRK's first two locations are in the Midwest, but more importantly, as you think about building, a big business in the golf space, talk about the importance of staying close to your roots or local to your roots.
Yeah, Kansas has been phenomenal. The startup culture that they have, it may not be as strong as you get in Silicon Valley and the coast, but there are great resources that are available if you come out and actually, try to take advantage of them. I think probably the biggest difference that you'll see is, like I said, a lot of people around here, they want to see proof. So I think for an entrepreneur, that's actually really good because you're not building a business off of hope and hype. You're actually building a business off of what you've done. So get out there, go do things. Once you actually get some success and show that you have traction, people will come on board. But you actually have to go out and do that and prove out that you've got a good concept. And they're not necessarily just going to follow you because you've got a great pitch deck and you've got some folks out in Silicon Valley that say, hey, this is a great idea, but you've never actually proven it, right? And I think there's a whole lot of hype that gets built around some of these companies that never really actually have the good traction to actually get started. So coming in the Midwest and actually building something from the ground up and getting traction before you start maybe fundraising or anything like that, I think instills some really good disciplines with you to go to go get started. And then, like I said, there's great programs around here that we have certainly tapped into that hopefully just people hearing this might also get recognized, because it's not something that somebody came out and told me about. We actually had to get involved in the ecosystem, and these opportunities started to present themselves. So Kansas Angel Tax Credits, there's another similar program over in Missouri, the Kansas Equity Match Program will come in and match a percentage of funds already raised. So they won't be that lead investor. You got to go out and find somebody else that believes in you first, but they'll come on and match and basically follow the same terms as those investments. Entrepreneurship programs around here that can basically give you startup funds to build an MVP. So there's a whole playbook of basically starting from zero money, building out an MVP, and then raising probably up to $1 million, $2 million for your first seed capital, all without virtually any money out of pocket. So I think that playbook is there. And if you can do it in the state of Kansas, I think you can pretty much do it anywhere.
Yeah, and I think it speaks to the larger commentary around the importance of community. And, I think you spoke obviously at length in terms of the entrepreneurial community in Kansas City or around Kansas City. Let's hone in on the community around the company and the business and, family, friends, former colleagues. Talk about the importance of having a strong community as you build a business, or in your case, businesses.
Yeah. I mean, lots of things that I could talk about when it comes to that. One of the things that certainly jumped out, my business partner made the leap into full-time entrepreneurship before me. He spent about a decade in kind of the staffing sales industry, built a really good network. So the day that he left, put a LinkedIn post, and I would say we got a ton of interest, potential franchisees who are in similar boats, who have day jobs, who maybe want to kind of get into entrepreneurship, but have something that kind of fit both, where they can maybe still have a day job and be able to maybe take up a golf track franchise. So we actually got some of our first franchisees out of that communication. And so that is a great testament to how you just need to make sure that you're building that network, getting your name out there, sharing that story, because you just never know, who that's ultimately going to reach. So that was absolutely critical. We've done a ton of things here in Kansas City. We really work very closely with the kind of the competitive arm called Central Links. They basically run all of the competitive tournaments around the area, both USGA qualifiers as well as the amateur tournaments that happen both on the Missouri and the Kansas side. So they have been a very close partner of ours, getting in with the only D1 program here in the community. The UMKC golf team are members because they don't have the facilities that give them access to TrackMan. So this is a great avenue for them. So we really try and get involved in the community because, frankly, I think golf is one of those things that does unify a lot of people, and a lot of people just really generally enjoy being around the sport. And I think that has allowed us to make sure that, we're constantly getting attention from a lead generation standpoint, but also just from a goodwill standpoint within our community.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think golf is, as you mentioned, one of the few sports that easily breaks down barriers, and for most people that I've interacted with around the game, brings people together in a way that I haven't seen other sports do. As we finish up on the conversation, would love for you to give any advice you've gained, or sorry, any advice that you've learned along the way that you could hand out to other entrepreneurs as they're kind of in early stages, potentially in starting a business in the golf space.
I am a big believer you just got to get out and start doing things. Take that first step, right? Like I said, I'm a victim of this too. I tend to think everything has to be perfect in order for me to go out and actually do something. And the more that I've actually realized is you don't need a lot of things in place in order to prove out a concept or kind of take it to that next step. Heard a great story about, kind of the scenario I described earlier where somebody thought, hey, I could sell bone broth, right, online, and maybe people would buy it. They didn't actually have any kind of bone broth, product, but threw up a website, threw up a little button, made the ability for them to actually pay for it, to pre-order it, and got probably 5,000 customers that ordered it. And you end up saying, okay, I don't actually have anything to sell them, so we're funding the money, but said, check back with me in 6 months and I'm going to have something to go sell you. So Like there's a million different things you could go do. And the barrier of entry now, especially with all the tools, the AI capabilities that we have, you can literally build an app by yourself using these AIs, softwares like Replit and other things. Like the excuses now for not getting and actually doing something are extremely, extremely low. And I think, especially in the Midwest, going out and doing something and showing that you taken that initiative goes a long ways, because I guarantee you that those same people have probably heard a million other folks come to them and say, I've got this great idea, right? So how do you differentiate from them? Say, I've got this great idea, but look how I've actually proved it. And that is a dramatically different conversation and puts you into a completely different category.
Yeah, I think to add on that, oftentimes people have this idea, visualize it as being this monstrous thing or very successful business. And ultimately, in order to get there, you have to kind of take the small steps along the way. And I think that's what people are always afraid of, is how many of those small steps it takes to see success. I think you're spot on in terms of just getting out there and doing it. You know, before we end and give the audience a chance to find you guys on social, would love to ask a handful of rapid fire questions just to give the audience a sense of you a little behind just the entrepreneurial side of things.
So
Awesome. What's the favorite golf course you've ever played? And you can't say your old country club.
I will say that I've actually plugged that into Noonan. It is a surprisingly difficult golf course. It's very, very short, and it honestly makes me so frustrated because it kind of it takes away your length. The trees are so overgrown and like the landing areas are so small. So it's deceptively designed very, very well. So I'm not going to say that one. I played that one enough. I would say probably the most fun I've ever had on golf course is Tobacco Road. It really kind of plays into the creativity, and I can play that one day in and day out.
Yeah, awesome. What's the one piece of gear you can't live without on the course?
I got really sweaty hands. If I try and swing a golf club without gloves, I'm screwed.
Are you a two glove guy?
No, I'm not a two glove guy, but I got to have at least a golf club.
Yeah, cool. If you could collaborate with any brand in the world, and let's talk about Noonan as a product or as a business. If you could collaborate with any brand in the world, who would it be?
Well, we use TrackMan in our facility, so a nice collab with TrackMan would be great.
Okay. When you're on the course, favorite snack or go-to drink while you're playing?
We do men's league every Wednesday night. There's a drink called the Duke, which is basically vodka, cranberry, and normally it's done with Fresca, but if you want to be a little bit healthier, you can do it with soda water.
And so it's called the Duke?
Yep.
Is it named for anything or?
Yeah, so our member guest is also called the Duke.
Cool. Very cool. What's the biggest lesson golf has taught you about business?
That's a good question. I don't think I've ever thought about that. I think off the cusp, I would just say persistence. Like I said, I'm a pretty competitive person. So if I'm not performing well, like I'm going to go figure out a solution for it. So that certainly goes with golf. If I'm not hitting the club very well, or I'm not putting very well, I'm going to spend a ton of time trying to figure out what's going on and what's wrong. I think that plays very well into the business side. We are constantly problem solving. If there's an area that is not working, I spend a heck of a lot of time trying to make sure that we go fix that and do better next time.
Awesome. And last question, what's your proudest moment as a golf entrepreneur so far?
Honestly, I think when we finished our fundraising, it was like a mad dash. We had to use those tax credits. Basically, there's a finite window. And I think we closed all the investments within about 5 minutes of that window being closed. So that whiskey celebration, just me and my co-founder, after that was done, was a pretty proud moment.
That's awesome. Well, Matt, I really enjoyed the conversation. Love to get to know you better, get to learn more about both of your businesses. I can't wait to download Noonan and start kind of figuring out how to improve my game because it's well needed. But I appreciate the time and please tell the audience where to find you and your businesses online.
Yeah, absolutely. So Golf TRK can be found at golftrk.com, all one word. Obviously, are looking for franchisees. So if you're interested in owning a golf simulator business, come reach out to us. Noonan is Noonan, NOONAN.ai. You can find us online or in the App Store under Noonan Caddy.
Awesome. Well, Matt, very much appreciate the time. Love learning about you and your business, and no doubt it's going to continue to grow and can't wait to follow along.
Awesome. Thanks, Ari.
Thanks, Matt.